Hello, everyone. And today is Monday, April the 13th, 2026, and you have joined Ask a Care Navigator, Mondays with Maureen. Hello, everyone. My name is Maureen Williams, and I'm the Director of Care Navigation at Four Seasons, the care you trust. And we try to create this space on most Mondays to talk about issues associated with living well and aging well, and perhaps how Four Seasons may be of service. If you have any questions about Four Seasons, please give us a call at 866-466-9734, or please go to our webpage, which is fourseasonscare.org. Please spell out the number 4. Or you can always drop a comment into one of the comment boxes from whichever platform you're viewing. And I'm delighted to be back at Van Winkle Law again this week, and I'll introduce you to my special guest again. We are so grateful that the Van Winkle Law Firm is serving as the title sponsor for this program, Ask a Care Navigator, Mondays with Maureen. The Van Winkle Law Firm is one of the most well-established and respected law firms in North Carolina, providing exceptional legal representation to individuals, businesses, and families in matters of personal, business, commercial, and estate planning matters. And I particularly interface with people like my guest, Heather, in estate planning matters. Should you want more information or to request a consultation, please go to the website, which is www.vwlawfirm.com. No, excuse me, I did that wrong. www.vwlaw.com.
No, it's VW Law Firm.
I am messing this up. Thank you. See, I need
I was
her.
running that through my head too.
Thanks.
VWLawFirm.com.
We are real people on a Monday. And I've said that so many times, but we're so grateful to you all for helping support us. Yeah. Well, my guest today is Heather Goldstein, one of the partners in the Van Winkle Law Firm. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Heather.
Sure. Thank you, Maureen, for having us and for partnering with my firm. We've really enjoyed being able to convey some of what we know and do to your audience, and appreciate the service that you and Four Seasons are providing with this series. So I am an attorney, and my area of interest is the exploitation of older adults. And so all of my work touches in some way around older individuals who are vulnerable to being taken advantage of or who have been taken advantage of. Sometimes we're working from a preventive point of view. When someone has a diagnosis where they expect to lose cognitive capacity, then they know they're at a higher risk than the average population. But even with folks who aren't necessarily at higher risk, we know that the data on aging and the risk of exploitation is overwhelming. So working on prevention, but then I also do a lot of work where active exploitation, fraud, or scams are underway, and we're looking to intervene and stop as best we can. So I think that that's what we'll be talking about today, is both the prevention side and the what to do if it's happening side.
Absolutely. This, in my practice, I've seen this far too often. Of course, you see people because they come to you for help, but it wrecks me. It wrecks me that this happens to some people, kind, generous, loving, kind people. Mm-hmm. So Heather is really going to talk to us today about fraud, scams, and exploitation, and how you all can protect yourself. So yeah, please take it away, Heather. Thank you.
So let's define the problem a little bit. I would put exploitation or financial abuse as a large heading, and then subheadings under that are scams, and a couple different. So in general, let's talk about exploitation, and a working definition that I would use would be acquiring an older person's property either through a relationship of trust and taking advantage of a relationship of trust, mm-hmm. or targeted based on their age or disability without their consent, or through deception, intimidation, or undue influence. So that's kind of a mouthful, but what that means in plain English can look like, first of all, we have specifically targeted a person in order to get their assets. And we've done that based on knowing that they are older or perhaps compromised in their own decision-making and self-protective mechanism. Then we are doing that through the taking advantage of a position of trust I actually did an earlier presentation with Maureen on power of attorney abuse. That's kind of a different bucket we're not going to focus so much on today, but a big part of exploitation could be a trustee, a power of attorney, someone you have trusted taking advantage.
Right.
That's one type. The other type is going to be the deception, intimidation, fraud type, which is really where we come to straight up frauds and scams.
Yeah.
And so what, you've all, you don't even have to be older at this point to be a victim. It's just that younger people are equipped to protect themselves a little better than older people are. But as an example, I've been getting a regular text on my phone that pretends to be from the DMV telling me that I have an unpaid moving violation and that if I don't click this link and pay it, that this is my final notice and it will be turned over and I will go to jail.
Yeah.
I'm 54 years old. I actually had to look that up to make sure it was a scam because it came from Raleigh, and I had recently been in Raleigh for a travel weekend, and I thought, well, they have those cameras there that scan. Maybe I was speeding. That's a scam. And so now every time I get it, I just report it because the reality is, had I actually gotten a moving violation, I would have gotten something in the mail. Mm-hmm. So that's red flag number one, is that these scams are coming by text, by email, and sometimes even by a phone call, but rarely mail. So you need to be very suspicious of unexpected texts, emails, and phone calls. And when in doubt, make your own contact. Never click through or respond to the contact that comes to you. You need to terminate that and call back. If it seems like it's from your bank, then you call your bank directly at the number that you know. Right. If it's a traffic ticket that seems to be coming from the DMV in Raleigh, then what you need to do is call the DMV in Raleigh yourself at their known number to verify that. That's a protective. So we also see scams that are the grandson in jail. Mm-hmm. The phone call that comes from your grandson who's in Oklahoma, he's been arrested. Please don't tell my parents. They'll be so angry, but I need $10,000 to bail myself out of jail tonight. And if you can just wire it to the number they're about to give you. Mm-hmm. That's a scam, but that's getting to be a really good one, especially with AI. They have the ability to make the voice sound exactly like your grandson or whoever is calling. So again, in that situation, you want to say, if you'll tell me what jail they are holding you, I will call back to that jail. Okay. So if they're going to say the Oklahoma City prison, don't say, I'll give you the number. Don't accept that. I'm at the Oklahoma City jail. Fine. I'm going to look up that number and independently call and see if you're there. And if are, I might be able to help you. Right. There's lots of banks and credit cards purporting to call to say, we need to update your account. You need to click this link and confirm your date of birth, your social security number, and your account number. Never over a phone or a text and email give that information. And then there's the one that I have seen most in my practice is the sweetheart scam. And this is an individual who you find online somehow, or they text you, they begin a relationship with you. And over time, it develops into something that seems like a romantic relationship. They promise that they want to move to your city to be with you, but they typically have to, they either need money to be able to travel to you, or they need money to wrap up their business affairs where they live, which is often overseas, but sometimes in the United States. And so they get you to send them funds, but they never come. These are so real. I have worked with two families with a client, with an older parent who has come into these. And what scares me the most about these is that these older parents are not cognitively impaired people. Mm-hmm. They are just lonely people who believe they are in a real relationship. And this scammer is really good about maintaining the relationship and making someone feel seen and loved and as if they have a companion. And it's incredibly difficult to extract from that situation. There are ways to do it, but I think you be alert to the sweetheart scam as being one of the most compelling and powerful that are out there right now. Any other scams that you're aware of or you've seen?
That's a rich one right there.
Yeah.
You're right about the sweetheart. I've seen it a lot in my own life with people I know personally. One gentleman in his 80s kept coming to us. I've met this person, needs this money.
Yeah.
Repeated relationships. It was heartbreaking.
That's the hardest one to break, because I think that older people, particularly if they're lonely, really crave to be in a relationship like that. Or if they've lost their spouse, so they haven't had someone in their life who is giving them that sort of loving feedback that you get from a romantic partner. It is a need that humans have for their whole life. And so people are particularly vulnerable to that one.
It's real, y'all. Be aware if you hear about new relationships with your older parents or grandparents. Just ask them some questions.
Ask some questions, right? So then, how does this happen? Because as I said, I have been getting scam. I mean, most of us these days do get scam texts and emails, but the rate of actual success on people younger than 70 is still pretty low. So why is it that people over about the age of 70 are so vulnerable? Well, it really does have to do with the way our brain and our cognitive abilities change over time. And so I've been interested enough in this that I've done some reading. I'm not a neuroscientist or a psychologist, so I'm not by education trained to explain brain behavior, but I'll tell you what I've learned, which resonates to me and what I observe in people, which is that when we are younger, and if you have children or grandchildren in their 20s, then you know exactly what I mean. Younger people can encounter a new problem, and without any instruction, they can just think their way around it. Their brains are primed for problem-solving new situations. A great example of that would be if I downloaded a new app on my phone, which I try to avoid doing because in general I find apps to be confusing because I'm in my 50s. But if I downloaded a new app, my 26-year-old son would be able to open it and immediately know what to do. For me, I need to then read first I got to get my reading glasses. Then I need to read everything, and I'm going to very slowly, and I will be able to understand it eventually, but I've got to read all the instructions and all of the prompts, where the younger person just flies through it. That is the incredible problem-solving ability of the younger brain that by the time we're in our 50s is actually already in decline. So 50-somethings don't solve problems with new data like younger people do. But what we have going for us between about age 50 and 70 is the other kind of intelligence, which is wisdom, learned experience. We have had so much experience that we know things and can spot danger that younger people can't. That carries us through until we're around 70 years old. And the wisdom part of intelligence kind of plateaus around 70. We don't lose it, but we don't keep gaining it. But that fluid thinking, which is the problem solving, is kind of in a free decline beginning around age 50, and it is declining for the rest of your life. So over about age 70, what you have is a very diminished and continuing diminishing ability to think your way out of new problems. And if the problem you're encountering is not one that you have seen many times before in your life, then you can't rely on learned experience to think your way through it. And that's what's really happening with these scans, is it's a new data set. It's a new problem to solve for. And you don't have that flexible thinking ability anymore. And you do not have cognitive impairment. You are not experiencing memory loss. I mean, if you have those things, then you are very much at risk. But I'm talking about your average 75, 80-year-old adult who is still going to the YMCA and swimming a mile in the morning and then going to their Mahjong group and playing Mahjong in the afternoon and coming home and cooking a healthy dinner and watching TV and going to bed early. These are not your children are not worried about you. And yet you have lost your healthy skepticism. And that's the best way to say this in plain language, is that things that would have put up a red flag for younger people do not put up a red flag for you. You don't see the danger, and so you just walk into the danger. So that is what's happening in your brain, why you are susceptible to this. And the reason that older people, that's the main reason older people are the targets more than younger people. Also, the population of adults aged 85 and up is the fastest growing population segment. So there are more and more and more people. 85% of the wealth concentration in this country is held by older adults. Yes. They have all the money, they have saved it. It is the nest egg. And this population, more than any other, is lonely and beginning to be less self-sufficient. And therefore, that makes them more likely to latch on to someone who is pretending to care or pretending to show interest in them. So those are the vulnerabilities. It's kind of a perfect storm. And the thing that I tell people when I'm giving this talk from a preventative is just believe me. Because I know that you might have listened to me run down the different kinds of frauds and scams that are out there and thought to yourself, well, I would know my grandson is not in jail. And I mean, that's ridiculous that nobody needs $10,000 that night wired in the middle of the night to get out of. None of this makes sense. Well, if you're having that reaction to anything that I've said, that's because you still have your healthy skepticism. Yes. But one day you won't have your healthy skepticism. And the best thing you can do for yourself is just believe that that is true. Believe that it will happen to you. And if you will accept that this will happen to you, then you can think forward to putting in some protection. I call it a circle of trust. It requires transparency, but then you can start to think through preventative steps. And so I could talk. Do you have anything more to add about your experience with older adults?
No, that's right, because I've met many of them who succumbed to scams, wealthy 90-year-olds, and now they've learned. I think it's more embarrassing, y'all, to have to admit Dad did this or I as mom did that, than for your older parent to say, I need you to be my accountability person, so that if I get a call, I can trust you to call you. That's a conversation with your older loved ones, and they may or not be receptive to that, but I think it's one of those gifts you give them if you're talking to them about this. The scammers are coming for them. They just are.
They are, and you have to keep saying that. And you're right. You mentioned like embarrassment. One of this kind of older adult exploitation goes more underreported than abuse and neglect of older people or any people gets reported, but these financial crimes and exploitation don't, and that's a couple of reasons. One is older adults are embarrassed that this has happened to them, because on some level, maybe not while it's happening, but after the fact, they might have a gut that this wasn't right. They're really embarrassed to report it. There are also barriers to break through around transparency. A lot of older people lived their whole life knowing that your financial business is your business. It's not polite to talk about money. You don't tell other people where your money is or how much you have. This is not polite society conversation. And many haven't shared that with children or other trusted contacts, or
even spouses, by the way.
Correct. That's a certain generation. Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So a big hurdle to get people over with self-protection is transparency. You have to be willing to share this personal, private information with the circle of trust that you create for yourself. And if you were trying to get in with an older adult who is vulnerable, you have to create a safe space for them, and maybe some checks and balances. We don't want them to put their eggs all in one trusted person's basket, because that's when we get to the other kind, which is the exploitation by the trusted person, which does happen. So you want to kind of be, you want to have some checks and balances in what you set up for yourself. But I think big picture, open, honest conversations with older people about their general vulnerability just because of their demographic, not because they have any personal deficiency themselves. A circle that is more than just one trusted person, but a couple of people. If you have multiple family members, that's great. If the older adult does not have family, then it can be several friends and neighbors, or if there is a banker or a financial advisor or a lawyer, those are good people to have in the circle of trust. There are people who are paid to be professional. We call them professional fiduciaries, but for an adult who doesn't have any immediate family or friends that can help, there are paid professionals who can come into this trusted role. So that's the first thing, is to think about who you trust to help protect you. And then you set up some checks and balances that will allow them to intervene. And one other thing to say about those complicating factors, there's the embarrassment. There's often there's confusion about whether or not they voluntarily consented. And they may not understand that I couldn't have been taken advantage of because I would have never allowed that. Well, you did allow it, and here's how. And they may not be clear about that. The flip side of confusion about whether I authorized this is I most certainly did authorize it, and I wanted to. And so I want to say a little bit about what I call the right to make bad decisions. Okay, because older people have that right. And this is a really tricky one when we start to talk to children who are watching their inheritance go out the door. And I'm sympathetic to that. It can be very difficult to determine whether this is an older adult exercising their own right to make decisions with their money that their children don't approve of, which is their right. Or is this an older adult who's been taken advantage of? Very hard to know. That's where earlier in life, honest conversations about what this person's intentions and goals would be are really helpful to know what they want. But I will say, in a minute, we'll get to sometimes actually having to go to court to stop this. Where I find the court system to be willing to intervene is when an adult is giving away or spending their own money at a rate that is dangerous to them. In other words, they might run out of the money they need to pay for their care for the rest of their life. That is a form of self-neglect, and courts will intervene. I have found courts to be less sympathetic when an older adult has a lot of money and the proportion that they're giving away relative to what they need to their care doesn't yet appear to pose a danger to them. And it's mostly offensive to the children who see their inheritance walking out the door. I find courts more inclined to say this might be a case where this older adult has a right to do whatever they want to do with their money at the end of the life. And boy, so that's one where you really say, really wish we would have had these honest conversations earlier to know, is this a person who their whole life didn't want to spend money and wanted to save it for the next generation? Or had the attitude of, I'm going to the grave with nothing and I'm spending it all on the way, which is absolutely their right to do. So kids not having a right to inheritance comes into these conversations, and you have to ask yourself why and what you're looking to protect. So here are some things when we talk about this circle of trust, some easy preventative things that can help decrease your vulnerability or increase the likelihood that a red flag will go up for someone if this is happening to you, even if the red flag doesn't go up to you. First of all, the majority of financial institutions will maintain what's called a list of trusted persons or trusted contacts. If you work with a financial advisor, they all have this, but even most banks, and many older people still like to go into their branch bank. They know all their tellers. The banks can give trusted persons. Now, what the trusted contacts list is if the financial institution becomes suspicious about the way you are pulling out your own money, then they can call the people that you have pre-authorized them to call by putting them on the trusted persons list. How will this be helpful to? And a bank can't just call. If you are spending your own money out of your account, a bank doesn't have a right to call your daughter and tell her unless you've given that permission. And so what you find is the financial advisors know this is how much you pull out every month for your regular expenses. And if suddenly an extra $50,000 or $100,000 comes out, that's not normal for you. They know what's normal. They can call your trusted person, and now someone else can potentially intervene if there's an exploitation or a scam going on. Same with your bank teller, who knows what's normal for you, will notice when something is not normal and can make that trusted person's call. So that's an easy thing to do. Freeze your credit. There are, and if in the state of North Carolina, there are instructions for how to do this on the North Carolina Attorney General's website. Go to the Attorney General. That's Jeff Jackson is our current Attorney General. Go to the website, look up credit freeze, and there are instructions for how to go through the 3 federal credit agencies and put a freeze on your credit. Now, because if you accidentally give out your social security number, your date of birth, which does happen, we would advise you never to do, but it does happen. If someone gets that information and your credit is frozen, then they're not going to be able to do things in your name like open new credit cards, take out new bank loans. This is a way that people get taken advantage of through frauds and scams when they give out this personal information. So double layer of protection. Now, you've frozen your credit. They're going to give you a password that you have to use if you ever want to unfreeze your credit. And so if you are an older adult over 70, let's give it a reasonable chance that you won't remember your password when the time comes you really need it. So I would have 1 or 2 other trusted people who have your password and know how to unfreeze your credit. And they know who each other are so that they're accountable to each other. I also think a really good thing to do is to whoever your trusted person is, ask your bank or financial advisor to send copies of statements to this trusted person. It could be a child, it could be a friend, it could be a lawyer, it could be whoever, it could be your CPA, just so that your account statements are getting another review. This is another person who can spot not normal behavior on your bank statements and intervene for you. I would say never share your personal login credentials. If you do online banking, never give out that username and password to your online banking. If you have someone who helps you with your finances, who should have access to your account, they should be authorized using a power of attorney. And that's the other conversation that Maureen and I had a few weeks ago. Don't put other people on your accounts and don't give them your personal login. The help that you need can come through a power of attorney. So those are sort of some easy self-help remedies that everyone should do. I mean, I've had my credit frozen for years. And I think I went to Talbot's a couple years ago for my biannual update, my professional wardrobe. And it was a pretty big purchase. She said, you want to open a credit card today? You get 10%. I said, you know what? Absolutely. I'll take the 10%. I couldn't do it because my credit was frozen. So, okay, that was a good thing. Yes. But note to self in the future, for a legitimate purpose, you got to unfreeze it.
Yes.
All right. So that is kind of, those are all things to do. Do it now. Do it no matter what age you are. But if we get to a situation where we are suspicious, then I think we want to, if we are in the protective position for that person and we have authority to do so, we want to make efforts to try to close their bank accounts or move their money. If it's coming by phone, you want to help the other person get a new phone or a new computer or change their email address. This can be really disruptive. There are phones that can block all incoming calls that are not already in contacts. This is a great thing for an older person, which is you've got your children, your doctors, your lawyer, all in your contacts, and those calls will come through, but no other calls will come through. You definitely want to get that kind of phone, and then start requesting bank records. Um, you can, if you're trying to help an older person and depending on the resources you have available, you should know the following. Number one, Adult Protective Services in every county will investigate older adult financial exploitation. So if you are not an authorized person, you're not their power of attorney, you don't have the ability to go in and take some steps on their behalf, you can call Adult Protective Services who can investigate and they can take these steps. These things are also crimes, and you can call the police. Now, Adult Protective Services and the police have backdoor channels to each other, and sometimes if you enter through one pathway, they're going to involve the other. But I always say in an emergency situation, make both of those calls and let law enforcement and Adult Protective Services work out with each other, which is going to be the better equipped to intervene in a given situation. If you have the resources or the ability to take some additional steps yourself, then you can, for fraud and scams, not talking about the power of attorney abuse, because when it's happening by someone who's actually authorized, that's a different set of strategies. You want to get that person out of their authorized. But when you're talking about third person, you often wind up in a guardianship situation. Mm-hmm. This is kind of the atom bomb of all of the things, and we hate to get there because it involves taking away an older adult's rights, but sometimes it is the last resort. And filing for guardianship can be done by any interested person. It is a court proceeding. The adult in question will be served. They will have a guardian ad litem appointed for them, and you will have to go to court and explain to the judge what your concerns are. It would be help to do that. You'll have to get some financial records to prove what's going on. And so in that case, it really is better to be represented by an attorney if you can find one. But these proceedings can and are done without an attorney. Adult Protective Services will also do them in certain cases.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Part. Wow.
Yeah.
But that's the last resort. It's the guardianship piece, right?
Really the last resort. And then in that case, because most of the time you're not talking about a person who's completely cognitively compromised, or they wouldn't be able to be accessing their resources to give to scammers. So you're going to be looking at a limited guardianship. And when I have seen these be successful, it is where the court takes control of the money and puts it with a third party, but leaves the older person a pretty significant allowance to meet their own basic needs. And in that case, you could potentially do this for an older person if you were authorized to get control of their money and could move it out of them. But there are these great, they're kind of like they're debit cards that can be loaded up with money from the responsible person, but can only be used at vendors that are pre-approved. So you might say the grocery store, maybe Target or Walmart, where you're going to buy basic supplies. The card can be used there, but a card could not be used at other places where there might be no reason. Now, that can be problematic depending on the nature of the fraud and scam, but you also can take away then their right to be able to send cash or wire money, right. And yet they can still go do all their own shopping and live independently in that way. The earlier you start these conversations with family members and older people in your life, the easier it will be to encourage them to give over some of this control when the time comes. I think the hardest cases are, you can bet that there's going to be a lack of self-awareness for the person who's being scammed. If they were really self-aware about what was happening, they wouldn't be being scammed. So they don't have a good view of what's really happening to them, and they're going to be resistant to the suggestion that they're no longer able to meet their own needs because they believe they are. So that's a delicate balance. That again, it always goes back to being transparent, circle of trust. I didn't say this before, but from a personal estate planning point of view, you can move all of your assets into a trust and have a mechanism for yourself to be removed as trustee and someone else be put in place. That is a good way to avoid the guardianship problem. because then you can just get into trying to trigger, how do we get you removed as your own trustee, someone else put in place. So if you have enough assets to make sense to do that, that's a good protective way.
That's great. In fact, we're going to have a future session on trusts.
Good.
And
good,
wills,
good,
too.
Good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I think we went a little over your 30 minutes, but
this is great because you're just going to see it. If you haven't seen someone, a vulnerable someone, succumb to this, it's just a matter of time. It's unfortunate. I love Heather's suggestions about the trusted circle. This is, to me, the strongest conversation you could have with your loved ones, alongside with, actually, what we're going to talk about next week is your healthcare directives. I think that's a strong conversation. But just know what your loved ones' wishes are, not just physically and healthcare wise, but financially and business wise, if they're willing to talk to you. And in fact, just last week, someone said, I've been asking my parents for this for years. They won't give me this information. And I happened to say, well, when is your birthday? You can ask for it for a birthday present. And she said, it's next Friday. That's what I'm going to ask for. Because, older parents will say, what do you want for your birthday? I want to have a conversation with you about how I can help you or protect you should the need arise. Give them that. So I think this is so timely. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much. Find that circle. In fact, from when you shared this last time, Heather, I've been thinking, how do I make my circle wider and yet tighter at the same time? So these things matter. And I suspect Heather's probably taking her own advice too. Oh, and speaking of, none of what Heather has said here constitutes legal advice, right?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Disclaimer.
Right. These are sort of broad suggestions, but how to really help any one particular person's situation depends on really looking at the facts around them. And, there's a number of attorneys, also financial advisors, I find to be very skilled and knowledgeable about this. So you don't necessarily need to see a lawyer, but just that partnership with different professionals.
Absolutely. And Heather is one of those fabulous professionals should you need her help at Van Winkle Law Firm at www.vwlawfirm.com. And it always drops in the comments box. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Much. Absolutely. In fact, join me next week, April 20th, and her colleague Coral Allman will be talking about the healthcare directives in the context of this is the 16th is National Healthcare Decisions Day. And I think that's always important to have a conversation about that. So thank you. If you have any questions about anything associated with Four Seasons, please call us at 866-466-9734, or please go to our website, which is fourseasonscare.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Maureen.
Absolutely.